Hello, welcome to Really with Tom and Dave. How are you? How are you, Tom? I
I'm
know how you are. I'm asking like I don't know.
fantastic.
You're not.
I'm
You're sick. You were whining about it earlier. To
I
the
mean, I was
but
definitely whining about it earlier. I'm
yeah,
I'm great. I had a little tea.
yeah,
We got a very cool guest. I get to see
yes.
you. I saw you recently in New York. That was really
That was
great.
really fun. That was so nice. Yeah, you and Christina were in town. We got to go out and have
Yeah.
dinner and hang out. Yeah,
You were
and your
saying we never see you, and there, see, we were together multiple times
yeah, and your
in the
business
past month.
trips were good too. That
Got some meetings done.
Yeah,
Did some walking in New York, which was beautiful. Oh,
yeah.
actually, it was a little cloudy first, but then it became just lovely, and we had
Yeah.
so much fun just kind of
Did you
cruising
get
around.
did you get to see any big gay theater stuff? Because I know you love the big gay theater
I do
stuff.
love big gay theater stuff. We didn't see big gay theater stuff.
No,
We went to the Knicks Sixers playoff
that's
game.
the opposite.
That is
That's the
opposite. I
opposite.
mean, I'm sure there were some gay people
Mm,
as well enjoying the
yeah.
basketball
Well,
game.
sure. Yeah, those men are
But
beautiful.
the Sixers, my team lost, so that
Mm,
was
oh, I'm
annoying
sorry.
because it was a
I'm
lot of really like seriously drunk Knicks fans screaming horrible things at my players, and I took it a little personally. But it was still fun to be at in Madison Square Garden with all of
yeah.
that energy, shall we say?
Hmm.
But there was some alcohol being consumed
Yeah.
by the Knicks fans and myself and Christina.
Hmm.
So it was all just a big drunken celebration
Well, it
until the
sounds
Sixers
good.
lost.
Yeah.
But other than that, it was a great trip. And then came back and got sick, which is kind of my move. That's what I do.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, the travel
Travel a little.
exhausts. You can't
Yes.
handle travel.
If I leave the house, really,
You're too
that's what
delicate.
happens. I'm
Yeah.
kind of don't let's not get started on the whole man cold thing.
No, I know. I
That's for our
believe.
Patreons.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, we want to go down that road again. But it's good to see you. I'm sorry you're not feeling well.
It's okay. I'm gonna
Um,
make it. I'm gonna make
you
it.
know.
I'm excited for today.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. So
This is
just
gonna be super fun. And let's
will you
let's.
start us off? Launch
I'm gonna
launch us.
start us off here.
All right.
Thomas Jane is an actor, director, and producer working in Tinseltown for over 25 years. He is a triple Golden Globe nominee for the comedy series Hung and has starred in such classic genre films as The Mist, Deep Blue Sea, and The Punisher. He directed and starred in the hit sci-fi series The Expanse, which huge acclaim, very loved. Thomas Jane won critical acclaim for his role as New York Yankees baseball legend Mickey Mantle in HBO 61, which was also great. His credits include Boogie Nights, Stephen King's 1922. His production company, Renegade Entertainment, has been prolific since launching in late 2019. They recently wrapped production on the second season of their scripted series Tropo, based on the best-selling novel by Candace Fox. Thomas stars and directs in that series for Amazon Prime. Check that out. And he recently completed his nonfiction book, A Human's Guide to Advanced Visiting Aliens, a combination of cutting-edge scientific insight, exo-speculation, and an incisive, unflinching review of the human condition. Makes A Human's Guide indispensable for ufologists, futurists, humanists, anyone with a keen interest in the human animal, and where we may or may not be destined as individuals, as a society, as a species. Very cool stuff. Let's bring on the man himself, Mr. Thomas Jane, joining us from
Hey,
Silver Lake,
Thomas.
California. How are you, sir?
How are you?
Pretty darn good. It's a lovely day out here, and I'm inside with the air conditioning. Just
That
starting to heat up out here.
yeah. But we get you know what here in New York it hit 82 degrees yesterday,
Yeah,
which
every
was
month seems to be
surprising.
the hottest month on record for, geez, what is it? It's like a large number of months, years actually.
Years. I think the last 10 years in a row have been the hottest year ever.
Right,
I
every year
think.
breaks the record.
Yeah. It's
It's not spooky.
yeah. No, it's just it's you know what it's. Here's the thing. If you spend like a billion years putting organic matter into the Earth's crust,
Right.
and then you take it all out in 200 years, it's going
Yeah.
to cause some problems.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the numbers, the CO2 is actually incredibly tiny, the amount that it's gone up. The big problem is we just don't have the computing capacity to deal with large chaotic systems. It's the hardest problem in math and physics is dealing with chaos. And
Mhm.
this the climate is chaos at a huge level. So the truth is, don't have the answers that we'd like to have. I mean, can we start cleaning up the trash? Yeah, hell yeah, we can.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
can we transition away from these polluted? I think China's building one coal mine every week, or a coal powered plant every week.
Oh God.
So
Hmm.
yeah, we can slow that down,
Yeah.
for
I just
sure.
bought,
But it's
I just
but
bought several acres of that plastic patch in the ocean.
did you?
Yeah, I figured it's an investment.
Can you
Yeah,
build on that?
eventually it'll be thick enough that you can live on it, I think.
Yeah. Geez, it's
I'm gonna wait till you get that resort sorted out, Dave. Before, like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be the first
a trash resort. It's actually
first
a great
guest on
idea.
the
Yeah.
island.
Well,
An
almost any.
ecological experience.
Yes, yeah, and all of the suites run the risk of being waterfront because they might sink. Is what I'm saying. Now, oh, I got to tell you, I love The Expanse. That was a
Thanks.
great show. I love your
Great show.
character in that show.
It was really
Um,
fun. Great
yeah.
set of books. Great people. We had a wonderful family. Almost all the crew would come back year after year, which is always a great sign.
Mhm.
That you're
Yeah.
doing something right when everybody decides to come back.
It was a great like sci-fi film noir kind of mix.
Yeah, I
You know.
directed my first episode of television on The Expanse. It was in season 5. They gave me an episode, and I absolutely loved it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Did that ignite a kind of is that sort of what kindled your interest in this subject, or did that happen far long before in terms of
It happened long before. I've always been a sci-fi fan for sure.
sure.
Yeah.
I mean that's probably well, it's up there with other genres, but it's definitely at the top of my list as far as entertainment, books, novels, movies. I love sci-fi, but that's not what got me into this. This is a completely different um, realm, which makes it fascinating for me. I mean, it's sort of like this collision between reality and something other. It's just, I guess, one of the big problems with the whole field of ufology, studying of aliens, is we just don't have any boxes to put these in. And then the ones that we do, science has done a certain amount of, there's evolution. There's the idea of like, if there were aliens out there, they wouldn't look anything like us. And yet all the reports of aliens that are visited and we've got thousands and thousands of these reports by now over the past 80 years, they're humanoid. That bugs the hell out of any scientist. So I can see how it's a hot potato for the academics to sort of want to take it seriously. I think guys like Gary Nolan are extremely brave be in full, wonderful academic careers, and yet diving in head first, so to speak, into the subject.
Hmm. Yes, a growing but still very small sort of cadre of of mainstream scientists that are
Yeah,
wading into this, and yeah.
right. And that's been true, almost since the beginning, where there has been a small number of academics who have just taken this seriously for one reason or another. And their contributions are invaluable to us,
Mhm. Yeah, going back to like Stanton Friedman, who was
right?
a nuclear physicist who started studying the UFO phenomena back in the 70s. Really, he started
Oh
um,
my gosh, he was
looking
such
into
a
it.
great advocate. He did such a wonderful stuff. Stanton will be missed. That's one of the reasons why I don't like this rebranding of the UFO,
Hmm.
because
Oh, as UAP, yeah,
right, because what that does for me is it separates the history, all these fantastic ufologists, all the way back to Frank Edwards or Kenneth Arnold,
yeah,
and when you're kind of like you're sort of cutting the butter in half, and you're separating them in a way that is, it doesn't honor the work
yeah.
these people have done over the years. So I still like to call them UFOs.
Yeah, I do too, and it's also I think there's that sense of certainly within DoD that they would kind of like it if we didn't look back. Um,
Oh yeah, no, it's
you know,
always as if it's just started, and it's
yeah,
amazing how they're repeating the exact same, excuses that they used back in the 40s and 50s. They're like, well, it might be some foreign adversary.
yes,
In 1950, there was nothing that was traveling 19,000 miles an hour through the air. I mean, we forget about it. Now you're like, well, but no, even today,
yeah,
that's not possible for us to do. Is what's his name? Newth, Kevin Newth pointed out one of those jet fighters will at 13 G's the wings get torn off the damn thing. Like,
yeah,
Yeah,
you
he's
can't do
awesome.
that.
Yeah.
yeah. They're saying the G forces that they're witnessing. We don't have any materials that can survive it. Never mind people.
Exactly. We don't know how to build the material that could withstand those kind of forces. We don't have the power either.
Yeah.
Again, Newth, he was talking about that tic tac that dropped from 28,000 feet down to sea level in under a second.
Mm,
He said the power that would require is more than the United States total nuclear power output for a year. You
yeah.
know, in in less than a second. He's like, well, it's either that or they are utilizing some form of energy that we just have we just know
Hmm.
nothing about. And I think that might be the case.
He creates such a cool like just interface of science. Like he's able to take these things and make them and like kind of boil them down. Like this is what you're seeing, not like is it or isn't it. It's documented through multiple radar, through witness reports. So it's like this is something in space, and then he's able to sort of apply physics
Physics.
to what we're seeing, and it's just
Yeah.
it's extraordinary what he comes up with, and
Yeah, in a
he's
calm, rational way. Just if this is the data, then these are the energies that we're
No.
talking about.
Yeah, and he's not. He doesn't study. He doesn't study or make predictions about stuff that he doesn't know anything about. If you ask him about alien abduction or something, he's like, "Look, I just don't." But he doesn't throw it out either. And I
Yeah.
find that to be a really cogent scientific attitude.
Hmm. It was. I was just I was listening to the book on tape of J. Allen Hynek and Jacques Vallée. It's called The Edge of Reality.
Oh
But
yeah,
in that it's basically a transcript of a series of conversations that the two of them had.
nice.
And but at one point he just talks about people that just make hypotheses or people demand him to come up with a hypothesis about UFOs. He said that's not science. Making hypothesis is only science if you also have an idea for how you can test the hypothesis.
Right,
So you
exactly.
can make up hypotheses all day. All that shows is that you got a nice imagination.
Right.
So they're useless without uh, an idea for an experiment you can do or a way to test the hypothesis for its
Yeah,
validity.
Paul Hynek, his son told me that Hynek and Vallée preferred the term meta-terrestrial, being that
Mm.
encompassing the fact that we don't know if they're
If
extraterrestrial, if they're extra dimensional. It's sort of an umbrella of this great unknown that we just don't. We You're right. We can't even come up with a hypothesis to prove, what
yeah,
if they're from other planets.
yeah,
Not.
yeah. All we know is that something impossible keeps happening. you know, and I think that should interest scientists. Like if when the
After
impossible
80 years,
when the impossible keeps repeating itself over and over and over again, and when really credible people are witness to the impossible, it seems like it should be taken seriously.
so
Well, how did you wind up taking it seriously? How did you wind up like
what lit
diving
the
in?
fuse.
You're lecturing about UFOs now and aliens.
I'm excited and terrified about that.
Yeah, we're
I'm
You will
used
be
to
at
having
contact in the desert, right? You will we'll be
end of
there. You're
May.
gonna be
End of May, it's huge. It's like a UFO Lollapalooza. I mean, it's they've got like 60 speakers. There's gonna be thousands of people
Yeah.
there. It's
Oh yeah, we're
super.
we're going to be there for
Oh, great.
we're going to be just to lower the
The bar
intellectual level
The
level.
of the group.
expectations,
Yeah.
just to get
Yeah.
people too excited.
It's the 10th anniversary too, so it should be
Yeah.
proved to be an especially exciting program. I've been working on it a lot because I don't want to get caught with my pants down.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, what's like when you what is can you tell us sort of the in broad strokes what the gist of your lecture is going to be, what it's going to be about?
Yeah, I mean, I think my interest, I guess, because you know of my love for storytelling, uh, which comes from a love of sort of the human condition. So the lens that interests me the most is sort of asking ourselves, what does this mean for us? You know, okay, obviously there's a lot of unknowns, and the stuff that we really think we know, it's not a lot, you know, like you said. But if this is true, if humanoid aliens are visiting planet Earth, and God damn, if it doesn't, sure does seem like they are. I mean, I'm totally convinced after studying it for the last 10 years. What does it mean for us? You know, how does
Mhm.
this change? How does this change our idea of, first of all, life, evolution, abiogenesis? Like, how, if life somehow started on this planet, obviously it's doing that. It's pretty darn prevalent. You know, if we've got myriad. The other thing is when you look at the cases from the 40s and the 50s, the so many different kinds of aliens, so many different descriptions of different species and different crafts and unique sort of technology that they use. I mean, I think that the general sort of thought today is that they're sort of like these gray aliens and maybe some reptilian looking aliens,
Mhm.
maybe some human looking aliens, but it's the panoply is huge. I mean, Jesus. Um, so what does that tell us? And they're all humanoid. What does that tell us? What does that
It
tell us
is.
about
Yeah.
evolution? The consensus view of evolution is that were you to rewind the tape of Earth evolution and play it back again, we nothing like a human being should ever arise to the intelligent status that we have because so many different random events, you know, like the meteor that wiped out the dinosaurs, if that had never happened, uh, and so many other sort of things that they get into, and they're like, wow, like the fact that somehow first these mammals that started out as little mice in the dinosaur age, and then that grew into these ape-like creatures, which then slowly got intelligence. They said nothing like a human should ever arise on any other planet, and yet
Mhm.
that's all we see. So, I mean, there's a couple of different thoughts. One is that there's some sort of convergent evolution going on different worlds, and that speaks to a whole forces that we just don't have any grasp on. And the other is that maybe it's only humanoid aliens that come study us because we're humanoid, so we're kind of part of a clade, and the
Mhm.
octopus creatures they don't not too interested, you know, or
They're
they
over the octopus planet.
yeah,
Yeah.
or they
Where the
spend
orgies
all
are
their
way
time
better.
in the ocean.
Yeah. You got to figure it. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is
But it's
fascinating.
yeah. I
Michael
hadn't even thought
Mast.
about that.
There's, yeah. I mean, we had talked with Michael Masters, who talks a lot about the time, possibly that
Yeah, the
we're
extra
visiting
terrestrial
ourselves,
model. Yeah.
which I had been really kind of, you know, Dave and I talk all the time. Like it's hard to pick and choose what you're going to, kind of like, oh well, I'll believe that, and that I'm gonna
Right,
when of
right.
course it's all a little up for grabs, and he makes such an interesting case, and I think and the one that you're also making, which is life is going to evolve in such different ways because the conditions are so different and ours are pretty unique that we that even bipedal
Right.
folks like us in this sort of gravity are unlikely. It's sort of just it's just easier for evolution to just put everyone closer to the ground, and the idea that yeah, that they would have these attributes is so unlikely.
And why
And
is that? Why does this happen over and over and over?
Hmm.
One of the really interesting things that have recently come out of, did you guys read about this microbiologist that came out on Reddit last year talking about the
oh,
genetic sort of study of a couple of these
Yes. Yeah,
beings?
where he was of the opinion that the genetics were not human, were definitely not yeah, where he was working on, like, an alien body.
Yeah,
And
and
but
that
that
I,
but there's signs of it being manipulated, that
right,
the DNA was constructed.
right, constructed of different creatures from Earth. So in other words, they've sort of taken a Earth sampling of DNA and
Mhm.
constructed this, which points to the idea that maybe that those are sort of some sort of um, biological robot that they're
Mhm.
putting
for
together.
for
Which,
those for those, and let me just say, like, just give a background to their viewers for a second, because I believe we're all talking about the same thing. Because there was this, it was, I think, about a year ago, right? There was this report that someone published anonymously, which, as writers all here and people who know science fiction or what, whoever did this, if this was just someone's, side gig work of fiction, it was fucking phenomenal, in terms of the science involved. It was a masterwork if this was
yeah,
fiction. And it's what's so interesting is that you see so much stuff on X or you see YouTube. Like, I don't believe anything anymore. Like, it's so hard to
Mhm.
know anything about anything.
right.
And yet, this was the most compelling reading. It was extraordinary
Yeah.
and
The guy
very,
knew what he was talking about.
Yeah. Well, I think
very,
Gary
very
Nolan
convincing.
said whoever wrote it knew their genetics
Right.
and was making references to things that wouldn't be general knowledge.
One of the things he said was that it looked as though these beings, call them bio robotic beings, didn't have an excretory system, right?
Mhm.
And that they excreted waste through their skin.
Yeah.
I thought that was fascinating. And you think about it, you're in a spaceship or you're flying, zipping around in a flying saucer. There's no toilet, there's not,
Yeah. Yeah.
you don't have a pantry full of snacks that you're, chewing on. Really fascinating how, and you can kind of reverse engineer how someone thought of the perfect sort of organism that you could use. And I think that is the future of AI. I think that circuits and silicon can only take you so far, and eventually we're going to start learning how to play with DNA.
Mhm.
They've already used DNA as a storage device. That something like a gram of DNA can store every DVD on the planet. Just a massive amount of information you can cram into DNA, and we really haven't found anything that comes close to it. So I think that's where we're going to go, in the
Yeah.
future.
And the notion that we may, yeah, start growing the devices we need. Yeah,
That's
like,
right.
if, rather than building a computer, grow a computer.
Yeah.
Grow a quantum computer. Um, you know, it,
And then
it's
you're utilizing consciousness, which I think we as humans have only scratched the surface of what consciousness is. That's the other takeaway about visiting aliens that I find really sort of interesting is telepathy. Almost all cases of human alien interaction has been through telepathy. There's
mhm.
exceptions, of course. But wow, what does that tell you? Okay, so is it a natural sort of have these beings naturally evolved to incorporate telepathy into their biology, or is that a technology that's been integrated into their physical systems that allow, or is it both? And
Mhm.
there's evidence for it to be both uh, because of remote viewing. Remote
Yeah.
viewing, and there's I love the work that's being done on psi phenomenon, which includes telekinesis, telepathy. Some really nice work's been done in Russia, in China, in America over the years that really points to there being a small but prevalent signal within the noise. It's not
Yeah.
just all bunk, which is another thing that scientists really hate.
Yes. Well, because it's another thing that is by the laws they've laid out is impossible.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
Consciousness does not affect matter in any way. That's a core tenet to the materialist worldview.
yeah,
So
but
humanoid aliens who are telepathic that's two
yeah,
strikes right there.
yeah, or
Why
the
do they
fact
look
that
anything like us? And they say, why the hell are
yeah,
they telepathic? So
but for some reason the CIA saw fit to spend millions and millions of dollars at Stanford to learn about remote viewing, and those programs are still going on because they seem to work. And again,
yeah.
it's that thing of you know. Science, it should be like catnip to science, but it's anathema to them
Mm.
instead.
Oh,
Um,
they hate it. They absolutely hate it.
yeah, because even there's also like I always bring up the Princeton Global Consciousness Study where they
Great study, right? With the
yeah,
random number generators, right?
and they found they found originally they had like graduate students coming in and just concentrating on a coin flip machine essentially and seeing if they could get it to veer from randomness and over and over again they could just by thinking about it. And
Yeah.
they said, well, what happens when large groups of people are focused on an event? So they set up these random number generators all over the planet. And then 9/11 happened. And
Right.
all these machines started creating patterns that were billions to one against chance, uh,
Yeah.
occurring through chance.
I think it was a 5 sigma, if I'm not mistaken, it was a 5 sigma sort of level of confidence that they had that there was a correlation between this slight trend towards non randomness and actually right before a big event like
Yes.
the death of Princess Diana,
Yeah.
9/11, the O.J. Simpson trial verdict. These kind of things. Apparently, the spike happens sort of right before the event, continues through it, and then dips back to randomness right after it.
Yes. Which is even weirder. Yeah. But
Completely
there's somehow
right,
information is traveling backward in time.
right. Retro causation,
Yeah.
which the quantum physicists have they're really confident in this idea of retro
Yeah.
causation in the quantum world.
Yes. Yes. That information can leak backward and through
Right.
time.
So, Thomas, when you're trying to put, because it's such a amorphous, moving subject topic, it covers so much. When you're trying to put this into a book, because you've written a book, Human's Guide to Advanced Visiting Aliens, like where do you start? What's your what's the goal with this? How do
Right.
you what compelled you to write it, and what was that process like?
Right. So it's called A Human's Guide to Visiting Aliens,
Okay.
Hmm.
and that is um, my my tour through sort of the the most confident. What are the things that we're most confident in? We're pretty darn confident that this is a real phenomenon. If you take the alien encounter accounts seriously, then personally, I'm very confident that these humanoid aliens are behind the thing.
Hmm.
We have no idea where the hell they've come from. We really don't. And we have no idea sort of what they are. We have no concept of the larger sort of cosmological ecology that surrounds us. Whether there's every sort of imaginable different kind of life form, intelligent life, are they all humanoid? Well, we don't know, but we know that these craft are exhibit anti gravity. We know that they have this. Some of the technologies that these aliens are reported to use. One of the fascinating ones for me is the solid light phenomenon. like somehow this is, you hear this a lot in alien abduction accounts, but this beam of light from the craft is able to go right through the wall of a house into a bedroom, pick up the biological human being with her nightgown on, lift that person, and then carry it through the air, through the wall or the window of the house into the craft, through, assuming that they're going actually through the physical wall of the craft and then into the craft. And then they're able to reverse the process when they're ready to drop that person off. And we hear a lot of different versions of this. I've heard it called solid light. I think that's
Hmm.
as description as any. And then you've got telepathy. So taking the sort of the things that we're most confident about, and what does that tell us about what our universe is really like? 100 years ago, in the late 1800s, the Royal Society said, there's basically nothing left to discover in physics. We've discovered it all. All that was left to do is better and better measurements, right? And then relativity and quantum mechanics came out, 20
Hmm.
years later. So we've been wrestling with that for the last, 100 years. And I think that there's another level. There's a scientific revolution equally as momentous as the quantum revolution happened 100 years ago that we are yet to experience, and that this alien technology may give us some clues as to what that is, which will open the door to what reality really is. If
Hmm.
they just take telepathy and first of all, consciousness, the mind body problem, it's a huge debate, in certain circles, sort of which is primary. Is matter primary in the universe, or is consciousness primary in the universe? And we don't have the answer. There's really good arguments on both sides.
Hmm. And yes, and does consciousness, uh, yeah, does it continue? Does it exist outside of our own brains? Does it
Right
exist? Yeah,
after death,
yeah,
is it? These
and it,
aliens are really good at reading our thoughts. They can tune in to our heads like a radio and hear everything that's going on and respond.
mhm.
So what that tells us something about what consciousness must be.
Yeah,
Uh,
and we're also dealing at a time when we're reviving people who have been dead for significant periods of time. People
the
who've been
near
dead for
death,
hours,
yeah, yeah,
and there. I know there's a New York University, the Parnia Lab. They've actually coined the phrase "recalled experience of death" to replace NDE,
okay,
near death experience,
well, that
because they're
makes sense.
saying these people aren't nearly dead. To quote
Right,
the Princess Bride, they're completely dead. You know, so these people have been dead for are for over an hour, and they're coming back and having all these experiences
right,
that again, according to science, are impossible. But I think now even a lot of like um, cardiologists and anesthesiologists who are witnessing this all the time
yeah.
are believing it and accepting it and saying this is we have to consider this as being a settled reality. Now we have to try and figure out how it's possible and what it means.
Yeah, the evidence is mounting, and it makes sense that this would take decades to finally start making a dent in in the consciousness of science. Near death is fascinating. These experiences, I've looked into them a little bit. I mean, absolutely incredible. And then you've got the reincarnation cases. That I think it's usually before the age of 8, and they've recorded thousands. What's his name? Stevenson. There's a researcher who collected thousands of
Yeah, I forget the name,
reincarnation
but I know the guy
cases.
you mean. Yeah, and
There's a
yeah,
guy in
really amazing stories.
Yeah, I think what I found fascinating, even when Dave and I started having these conversations, is that this sort of the phenomenon, whether it's near death experiences, reincarnation, abduction experiences, DMT experiences, it's just there seems to be this scratching at the thinnest part of the membrane that is converging these things
Right.
into a, to me, I just keep thinking about the kind of fishbowl aspect of our existence, and this feeling
That's right.
that there is a universe teeming with life around us that we are beginning to become aware of in these strange different ways, where the DMT experience seems to mirror the near death experience. The near death experience has some aspects of the abduction experience, and even though these are all seemingly private, very difficult to quantify or study or whatever, the the data of just anecdotally seems to suggest a similar place, a similar journey, similar access, and then a similar awareness of what you were talking about, a universe that's really plentiful with life. I mean, that seems to be the impression, is that it might be a lot closer than we think. It might be a lot more aware of us than we are aware of it. But
Absolutely. It's yeah, I love the fishbowl analogy. I actually use that in the book. You know that humanity, we've crafted the lens through which we see the world, and we've done that culturally over and over again, right? From the Greek gods all the way up to this revolutionary, scientific, materialistic view of the universe. And what we can't seem to wrap our minds around is that they're all wrong.
Hmm.
Well, we were wrong with the Greek
People
gods,
don't like
although
being wrong. Yeah.
yeah, that helped.
Yeah.
It was a usable theory. We could run a society with the idea that Zeus and his gang were up there and punishing you or rewarding you, and that worked. And the the worldview that we have now works. But
Hmm.
they're always limited, and aliens for me, are, like you said, scratching at the edges of our fishbowl lens, right? There's something there. There's a fly in the ointment. And that's always it's those anomalies that you always want to look for in order to sort of break open new vistas into our reality. And that excites the hell out of me, which is why I wrote the book.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
really sort of taking evidence for what we know, and then you find that these sort of weight the argument, like say the mind body problem, right? Is it consciousness or is it materiality that runs things? Well, if all of these, intelligent creatures are all conscious and they've got telepathy, and it's really, it makes you think twice about thinking that the world is completely material or even primarily material.
Hmm.
So I think it can help us to answer some of the big questions.
Yeah. Well, I know definitely as a salty old atheist most of my life. I've always rejected any explanations that weren't materialist.
Right.
I was definitely a materialist reductionist and believed that, well, anything weird, I believed there was weird phenomenon, but I always believed, well, we can, if we just find out what the forces are at play, we can figure it out.
Right. And
And
it'll reduce to something
yeah,
material.
yeah.
Right.
And now through getting really deep into the UFO phenomenon, and then that leads you to thinking um, about consciousness and
Right.
about persistence after death and all those other issues. And now
Right.
my confidence in materialism is shot to hell at
And
this
you're
point.
finding a lot of that's happening to a lot of people these
Yeah.
days.
Yes, I think that is true, because again, you can, again, it's that thing where the impossible keeps happening. You got, something's got to give. You've got to, and at the same time that the UFO phenomena is getting more respectability,
Yep.
grudgingly a little more respectability. You
Oh,
also have,
yeah. Did you hear this Arrow report that just came out, basically trying to do the exact same thing that the Condon report tried to do
yes,
in '68, which is nothing to see here, folks. Go back to, to
yeah,
your job. Everything is normal. I mean, they really hammered it home. Like, we are
yeah.
not dealing with this. There is no evidence whatsoever for the existence of anything extraterrestrial or anything else outside of what we know. Sure, they're unknown, but that's it.
Yes.
it
Yeah,
was
and
it's
like the
really
Condon
wild, yeah.
report, yeah, the content of the report contradicts the summary, much like the Condon report, where Condon said
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's nothing to see here. There's nothing to learn, no science to be found. But then the body of it, 30% of the cases they looked at in the Condon report, they couldn't figure out.
That's right. The
You know,
signal has been there from the very beginning.
The arrow thing was so funny because it was sort of like what they were saying was like, well, look, if we looked harder, we'd be able to figure all of them out. And it's
yeah,
like, what the? You barely had time to get the Post-its ordered for the
yeah,
office, but
Yeah.
you've now thoroughly investigated, 80 years of phenomenon and reports. They seem to just toss all the witness reports. Even, we had Mario Woods on the show who had his story is has documentation, of his medical effects of his incredible story,
Right.
and it
yeah,
is it seems a sort of mix of sour grapes, intentional misinformation,
Yeah.
a really old playbook. He tried to take as many swipes as he could at Grush,
hmm
and it goes from the kind of the big ideas that we're talking about that are critically important, but also just the boots on the ground kind of how we're going to talk about this and how we're going to
Right.
dialogue. Tell us, you helped form, or you're on the board of this the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. Can you tell us sort of how did that come about? What the goals
Right. Yeah.
of that?
Uh, Steve Bassett is a UFO researcher. You guys are probably familiar with him. He's been like the head of the spear of the disclosure movement for decades.
hmm
So he's been a pal for a long time, and I think this is him and the guy named Dan Harari and a few other folks. It's their brainchild. I when I was writing a graphic novel called Bad Planet, and it was about aliens, and like an alien convict breaks out of prison on an asteroid to come down to Earth and
We
get
can talk
revenge.
comics anytime you want. By the way, I'm all good with that. But go ahead.
hmm
Sorry, bad plan.
And so I had some questions, and I found this organization called the the Science Exchange. Is that what it's called? Hollywood and Science Exchange, something like that. It's where you can call up a scientist and you're like, hey, I've got these questions about, teleportation or time travel or space travel or, how long can you survive without your helmet in
I
space?
need that number. Yeah,
That's a
that
great
sounds
that's a
cool.
great resource.
That's a
I'd
good
never heard of it. Yeah,
I know.
Great
especially
resource.
Tom. Tom
Yeah.
writes that sort of stuff all the
I know.
time.
So this is similar. This is the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance is sort of doing the same thing, but with UFOs and aliens. You want to hopefully start injecting some more reality into the stories that we tell about
Okay.
aliens. And the best way to do that is to call up a guy who's been studying the phenomenon for 40 years,
Okay.
and hopefully try to start changing the narrative. Aliens and Hollywood have a long and storied career, and they're usually like big brains with bug eyes, and they've got space
Mhm.
guns. It's Mars attacks.
Yeah, yeah,
Some
and there was some, and there was definitely a concerted effort to lead our industry to present a view that the government or that the intelligence
Absolutely.
community, the CIA, wanted portrayed.
Right, right,
Back
yeah, and
going back to the Robertson panel.
yeah, and Project Mockingbird and all that.
hmm
CIA
Yeah,
sort of taking control of the narrative in so many
yeah.
different ways.
And I know
Certainly do.
as a comedian, I feel a certain responsibility. I think comedians did their fair bit. To marginalize and ridicule the subject.
Yeah, I mean, it's an easy target, and it has
Yeah,
been for decades. So,
yeah. And
we're trying
comedians are lazy people. Trust me. Oh
low
my god.
hanging fruit.
Oh, that's the only fruit. That's the only fruit they'll ever eat.
The best
You're
kind.
not gonna see. You're not gonna get comedians to jump at anything or climb. Yeah. No. So
Well, it
no,
seems
but
like it does seem like we're in the sort of Empire Strikes Back mode. If you kind of consider the last couple of years as being pretty remarkable in terms of at least what's been talked about in government, if you're paying attention, I mean, in media and with the whistleblower legislation and just the academics we've even talked about, the fact that it's being discussed, the fact that Stanford would host something like the Saul Foundation, the fact that there is this kind of movement, and then you turn around and Arrow does this sort of like, okay, guys, everybody calm the fuck down. There's nothing here,
Yeah.
and it really is sort of like a kind of shot. It's definitely an effort to tamp
Put
it down.
put the
Yeah.
toothpaste back in the tube as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm
And the New York Times and the Washington Post leapt at it with
yeah, yeah. Will they
with
succeed? Do we think?
quickly as they could.
It's interesting because they certainly succeeded in '68 with the Condon Report, right? And that shut
Mhm.
the goal was to shut Project Blue Book down. They absolutely achieved that goal. Not only that, they made it kooky so the reports of UFOs went down, and the reports of aliens went way down. These alien encounters were pretty darn prevalent in the 50s and throughout the 60s and into the 70s and 80s. We still have them, but they went way down because it became anathema to talk about UFOs and aliens. And they're trying to do that now, but I think social media, the internet, the conversation has changed in a way that the toothpaste is not going to go back in the tube. But that does require a certain amount of work, from people like ourselves and anyone else interested in the community. We have to make noise. We have to
Yeah.
start a lot of noise.
Well, have you noticed a change in the response that you get from people in the industry, the entertainment industry, when you talk about these issues over the last few years?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I've heard that from my friends as well. I got a buddy who lives up in Santa Barbara. We were talking about it. The subject came up on the phone, and he's like, man, I'm out, with friends, or we're at a restaurant, and people talk about it so much more often now. And it's less hidden. It's people are curious. I think a lot more people are curious than, you would be led to believe. They're not posting about it online, and they're maybe not, they haven't bought any books yet, but they're interested. And you hear academics also, are now sort of beginning to hear the tune and go, wait a second, there's something I missed. I just got this great book right here. It's called Unidentified Flying Hyperobject. And this is by an academic named John Madden, and it's a terrific sort of analysis. The guy brings in Heidegger, Kant, Nietzsche, and he's sort of reevaluating the phenomena through his academic lens. And I think we
Mhm.
might start seeing more books like Unidentified Flying Hyperobject, UFOs, Philosophy, and the End of the World.
Wow.
It was a great read. I highly
Yeah.
recommend anybody interested in philosophy and UFOs to pick it up.
Yeah, and I know
That
one thing
sounds
I've
very
noticed
cool.
is like 2 years ago, I remember talking to my representatives, and saying, I think I'd like to do a UFO podcast, and the phone call just sort of going dead silent,
Right.
and after a long pause of, yeah, or well, the podcasting thing is interesting, but
Right.
maybe we could look at maybe something about comedy instead, and
Stay in
and
your wheelhouse.
yeah, but then recently I've had meetings where with my representatives, and they use the phrase, everyone's looking to do something in the UFO space.
Oh, interesting.
So
Wow.
now in the industry we have the UFO space
Oh, I've just
is
heard that Spielberg's dusting off a UFO project that he's putting together,
yeah, well, I know
which would
his
be
company did
great.
that Encounter series for Netflix that
Yeah,
was pretty
yeah, yeah.
interesting.
I
But
think
I
this
think
is I think this is a film,
yeah,
a fictional film. I think he's going to add to the canon of Close Encounters and ET.
that would be
He's going
great.
to lay another one down. I think that
Mm.
would be fantastic.
That will be awesome. And I'm still curious because have you yourself seen a UFO?
I got into this 10 years ago and became completely consumed by it because I did have an experience. And I won't talk about the specifics of that experience because, there's so many different sort of. If you go to a UFO convention, I've never been yet, but I hear a lot of those people are there. They've had experiences. They're looking for answers. They're
Mhm.
they're sitting their butts down and listening to a 90-minute lecture because they're trying to figure this stuff out. So I'm one of those people. who had an experience that I absolutely could not explain in any fashion, blew my mind. And, I could separate my life from the time that happened until the time after that happened. And, and I'm so grateful, I've never studied. 10 years ago, I was not looking into near death consciousness, telepathy, anti gravity, humanoid aliens, convergent evolution. I mean, none of this stuff was in my vocabulary. No idea that it was so fruitful. And I look at it as a gift. It's an incredible gift. And it does, I think that if we have hope for the human race, we're going to have to start incorporating some of the lessons that we're learning from the fact that we're not only are we not alone, but there's intelligent creatures who are here. And why are they here? What the hell? And why are they so shy? Why are they so shy? No scientist would ever think that aliens come down, travel 100 light years across to just show up and hide in the bushes. What the hell is going on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean they're shy, and then very very not shy with those who have the
Abduction experience.
experiences.
Yeah.
Certainly the those we've spoken to who, but they're able to shield. They're able to really focus on that person and make everyone else sort of
Right.
I'm sleepy. I'm in a sort of zombie state. I mean that stuff I find is another aspect, I guess, of the telepathy we talk about now. And prior to this experience that you're talking about, had in your life there been anything? I mean, I guess you describe as paranormal. Anything that you had, thought would, even if you didn't put a kind of alien or anything
Yeah.
name to it.
Yeah, prior to that, I'd had two experiences in my life that I couldn't explain. One of them, I was coming back from a fishing trip with my dad and my grandfather. I was about 8. My grandfather's car had a sunroof, and at night we're driving, and I saw a fireball up in the sky, sort of doing like a figure 8, following the car. And I tried to get my dad's attention, and he was sort of like switched off. No response. My grandfather and my father would just drove like zombies down the road as I'm in the back seat going, hey, guys, Dad, check it out. Do you see this? So that's a memory. It's so long ago that, I can't definitively put that in the reality basket.
Right.
So
No, I get it.
It's an unknown, right?
Yeah.
The other experience I had was not anything to do with UFOs, but my dad and I were fishing in Pretty Boy Lake, which is in Maryland. There's a lake called Pretty Boy. It's really isolated. My dad's a huge hunter and a fisherman. He used to drag me out, wake me up at 4:00 in the morning to go spend the day on the river. He liked nothing more to do that. But as a kid, after like 20 minutes, I'm like dying to get the hell out of there. And I started hunting for bugs. But we were actually hunting. We were fishing for crawdads, crayfish. We'd take a string and you'd tie chicken to the string, throw it out in the water, wait about half an hour, shine a flashlight on it, and the whole thing would be crawling.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, really?
My mom would boil them up and then make scampi, like shrimp scampi, but with crawdads.
Sounds awesome.
One of the best things. I mean, it's like the greatest. My mother's crawdad scampi is one of the great highlights of my childhood.
That you guys caught. I love that. That's so cool.
So we were out there fishing Pretty Boy Lake, and across the lake, the lake is really big, but down the shore, about a couple of 100 yards, maybe 300 yards, 200 yards, pretty far away, we hear this guttural screaming going on. At first, we think it's a man. He must be being killed. Jesus. But as it went on, it was not a man. It was way too deep. It went on for way too long, and it sounded really pissed off. And me and my dad are looking at each other. It had just gotten dark. Crayfish is a nighttime sport, so it was night, and My dad is 6'3", and he's a Vietnam vet, and he's been in the woods his whole life. And I'm looking at my dad. If this guy freaks out, I know something's up, and like, this is something to worry about. My dad looks up, and across the lake, this roaring scream came again, and then the trees started to shake, and that you could hear the cracking of the trees, right? And then that cracking started coming toward us.
Yeah.
My dad grabbed. I was probably, what was I, 9 or 10 years old. My dad grabbed me under his arm, picked up his stuff, and ran to the Jeep, which was quite a ways away from the lake, and that was terrifying. I've never been so scared in my life before or since.
How old were
Yeah,
you?
that sounds amazing.
I was young enough that he could literally lift me up and carry me under his arm for hundreds of yards back to the Jeep. So I must have been 8, 9 years old, something like that. 10, maybe 10.
That
Yeah.
Um,
is wild. Did you and your dad ever talk about what the
Oh, we
F
do, yeah.
that
Every
was?
every now and then we it's one of the family stories that we
Yeah.
retell every now and then around the dinner table.
But you didn't stay long enough to see what was coming out of those woods.
Absolutely not. That
Yeah.
those trees were not little trees, and they started shaking and then breaking, and you heard the
Yeah.
cracking of the wood across there, and then it started coming toward us, and we weren't sticking
Wow.
around. It was
Yeah.
it
So
was
there's some
Yeah,
paranormal
that's
stuff.
inexplicable. I
Yeah.
mean, I remember my wife and I went to Belize, and we had never heard howler monkeys, and
right.
and we were just not prepared. We were city folk, and we didn't know anything that was going on. But that's kind of what it made me think of. It was like, and of course, not a lot of howler monkeys in Maryland, um, and it sounded like a lot bigger. But yeah, that's a terrifying sound.
Yeah.
My
Does-
dad, in the being a hunter and a fisherman since the time he could crawl,
yeah.
has heard and seen just about everything there is to hear and see in the woods.
Now, does
Yeah.
Maryland have any sort of legends, like cryptid legends, like anything like a Sasquatch or the New Jersey Devil, that sort of thing?
Right? Yeah, the Sasquatch is pretty darn prevalent, all across. Certainly the West Coast and the northern West Coast, but also you find them down in Florida. They call them, what do they call them? Swamp something.
Hmm.
And yeah, they sort of, their stomping ground sort of creeps around in that area. Not as prevalent as other places, but certainly not unheard of.
Yeah.
And this was back in this would have been the late '70s, so a lot less, developed as it would be today. I mean,
Yeah.
you could get out there, a lot of country roads and a lot of places that, you had to drive a couple hours to get into, and there was absolutely nothing around.
Yeah.
That's where we were, Pretty Boy Lake.
Yeah, we grew
Well,
up in Pennsylvania, kind of country, and
Yeah,
I truly felt assailed by the unknown in that, when it wasn't, we had a house that had a lot of activity. Of course, I lived in terror of Bigfoot. I mean, that just In Search Of episode with Leonard Nimoy when it
oh
just
my God, the best.
showing up at the cabin, and you're like, Bigfoot just shows up at the door, knocks at the cabin. It's like, I'm never fucking going camp. I'm never going to any cabin. It was, but it
In
sounds like
search of. Yeah.
you had a very legit
Yeah.
Sasquatch encounter, and what's again so just puzzling about all this. I watched
Very legit.
first episode of Skinwalker Ranch last week,
oh,
Yeah.
the
which
new season or yeah,
yeah, it's
no,
a
I
new season
haven't
out,
seen the
which
new season yet.
I continue to find fascinating,
Yeah.
and I think has given new sort of oxygen to this idea that is that somehow connected to all of, again, like, does that get enfolded into this
Right. Right.
sort of membrane
Yeah.
of kind of weirdness and phenomena? Because it seems like it does. It seems like there's something to it.
I
Yeah.
like the way Richard Dolan describes his sort of encounter. He came across a UFO book. He was a history buff. He said, and he's looking at these sort of historical accounts, and he's like, "Why haven't I read about any of this in the in my textbooks and stuff?" Because they're talking about the Project Blue Book and the president and Carter and why isn't this a part of the lexicon? And he said, "I think I'll take a month and figure this out." 30 years later, uh, and I like what he says. He says, this is a subject you think you can dip your toe into, but it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper.
Mhm.
Certainly, I think people who are science minded or sort of reality based, they're not thinking, I'm not going to mess with alien abductions and all this craziness. I just want to know about the craft that are being caught on radar and seen by pilots, and reported by military personnel. What's that? And that just opens a door to so many different doors. And that becomes part of the problem because you're right. You were saying earlier, the subject is so big, there's so much going on, and there's so much to explore, and all that's true. But, it also, it can, personally, I don't want to find myself toppling over into territory that's so far gone that it's not connected, at least
Yeah, no, no.
tangentially, to what we know, to what we
Yeah.
can describe.
Well, I know my good friend and our friend who's been on the podcast a couple of times now, Jeremy Corbell,
Yep,
um,
great guy.
has a but he has an absolute. He does not want to deal with the woo aspects of any of this stuff at all. He really doesn't like to deal with it. It makes him very uncomfortable.
Right?
Um,
Yeah,
and
and
then
I can understand that.
Yeah, and
Much.
then weird thing is that because I started getting seriously thinking about all of these issues about 10 years ago as well,
Mhm.
and after years and years of like being deeply interested in talking about it publicly, Jeremy and I had an experience together where we saw a UFO,
Oh, wow.
and neither of us had ever seen one, and
Oh,
there were some woo aspects to it that Jeremy still really hates.
wow.
Like there was an element of our consciousness being
Oh,
manipulated.
yeah, that's very common from what I hear. Was it a light in the sky, or did you
It
see
was
the
a
actual
it
craft?
was a real craft with a lot of detail. We saw a very large orange glowing craft with three
Wow.
white lights on the front of it, and
Oh,
it circled the valley we were in and hung in front of us. The weird thing is, like, it was a beautiful night, and I said, Jeremy, this would be a great night to see something.
wow.
And like a minute later, Jeremy goes, "Turn around, Dave." And I
Wow.
turn around, and there's this craft off in the distance, and it
Uh,
circles this valley, gets right in front of us, hangs in front of us, and for about a minute,
that's
and then goes
cool.
behind the mountains. And not until it went behind the mountains did either of us speak.
And you felt
Uh,
like there was some sort of consciousness effect in what
well,
way?
I felt like there was something that all of our excitement, any excitement we should have had, and any
Right,
emotion that we should have had,
right,
any awe that we should have expressed,
right.
all of it gone, nothing.
That's interesting.
We were both just kind of neutral for the
That's
entire event.
interesting. I can tell you that the experience that I had the exact same reaction. It was only afterward, long out, the next day, until the thought occurred to me: why the hell didn't I jump up, or grab a camera or scream, or like I was so it seemed like I'd sort of been, although I didn't feel that at the time. What I felt was terror. Okay,
Mhm.
terror,
Yeah.
uh, because it was up close. But I didn't. My reaction I found to be very strange. But
Yeah.
only till the next day.
Jeremy's a guy who practices getting his phone out and as fast
Right.
as he can and taking pictures all the time to be ready for this. And then when
Yeah.
it finally happens to him,
Right.
and at one point, the only thing he said for the entire encounter was, "I'm not even going to try to take a picture."
The thing that reminds me of something that I talk about in the book that I find really interesting, is that the consciousness, the impact, if these creatures, aliens, intelligent beings, whatever you want to call them, have control over consciousness, right?
Hmm.
And they do. So many cases where we're like, then that would go a long way to explain why we don't have more really good video or uh, photographic evidence of these things. Because what your experience could happen to that could be
Yeah.
sort of the mo of these ships. They probably can see consciousness the way we look at a map and we see these little red dots that point out cities. They're flying around. They have those dots. They know where every conscious person is and what they're doing, whether they're asleep, they're awake, how aware are they. And as soon as you become aware of them, imagine a little light goes off on their board and they're like, there's one.
Yeah.
He's looking at us right now.
Yeah.
I think that they would have capabilities like that.
Yeah, well, kind of. I know that Lou Elizondo's kind of alluded to that. He's, as he does when he speaks sort of in a hypothetical, like, "What if?" And then
Right.
he goes, like, "What if? What if the truth is that these beings can come and go as they wish, can be in your home, can be monitoring you 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and there's
Right.
absolutely nothing anyone can do about it. What if that's the truth?"
Oh
Yeah,
And
I
you
man,
like
go,
that. What
"Why?
if?
Oh, Lou, you're telling me it is, aren't you?" You know?
his his analogy of what constitutes a threat is chilling because, and to give him the full credit, and I hope to talk to him about it sometime, but it was like, is it because he's the threat assessment guy, right? And
Right.
he was saying like, well, if you're in your house, and you guys probably know this, and you shut your windows, and maybe it's a certain, I don't know, you're worried you might lock the doors, and if you're really security conscious, you might turn the alarm on, and go to bed, and you wake up the next morning, and there's muddy footprints all over your house, and
Right.
the alarm's still on, and everything's, and he's like, well, does that constitute a threat?
Right.
He says that's how the military is dealing with this thing. I mean, it comes in. It's not, you weren't killed in the night, but
Right.
you're certainly dealing with something that wants you to know is there, and can just
It
completely
can do what it wants.
disregard any effort at security.
Yeah.
Um, and,
Yeah. It
It
can
lives on
turn.
he's,
an extra dimension, right? It's like
Hmm.
living in the three-dimensional world. It's amazing how many flat surfaces we rely on, right? We
Hmm.
don't have a lot of control over two dimensions, but
Yeah.
cars, tables, driveways, highways, even airplanes, they're straight geodesic lines from point A to point B. These guys have an extra dimension to be able to play with. So they can run circles around us. And they do.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was was it David Fravor's experience. You said that, yeah, the, there's nothing in our arsenal, nothing planned in
Right.
our arsenal, and he's a guy that would know. There's nothing on the books that can do what these things do.
And the threat narrative is good for trying to get money out of the government to study the thing or awareness of it.
Yeah.
There's always money when there's a threat.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess it's in the mandate of the military. So if they're going to do something about it,
Yeah,
there has
that's
to
their
be
job. And it's a
some notion
pretty
of.
good explanation for why they don't really want to come out and admit it, because they don't want to admit that they don't have any control whatsoever about it.
Yeah.
We set the alarm and we got guards outside, but in the morning there's plenty of footprints everywhere.
Yeah.
It
And
doesn't make it look good.
nothing's been stolen, nothing's been damaged, but yeah,
yeah,
but
and tough for them to admit, and that just, I mean, there's a, with all of the weirdness, there's a certain very understandable psychology, very basic psychology of like, we don't want to look weak,
Right,
and that might be just the motivation enough they need to keep smushing the story,
right.
and they just don't want to look like and then all the other questions, right? Because we also because we don't know what the hell it is, and we don't know what they want, if they want anything or what they're doing, and not justifying it, but I certainly could see the
yeah.
easy case to be made.
We've run our societies on those kind of assumptions for thousands of years, right? I mean, all the forts that the first thing you do when you establish a space is build a fort around it so you can
Hmm.
defend it. I mean, that's our MO. You know, we are a war. If you had to look like, what do we spend the most money on? What do we do the most? It's war. It's making war.
Yeah.
So I think that the fact that they not here, if they're here to invade us, they sure are taking their time about it. And that's not necessarily. Maybe they are. You know, I like. Do you guys familiar with Dr. David Jacobs' work?
Yes.
You know, he takes he's a
Do you need
production.
proof? Look, I got it right here.
Oh, look at
Uh,
you.
oh, that's a
The,
great one.
the
Yeah,
threat. I haven't read that.
Yeah.
his books are classics. I think they're must reads for anybody interested.
Yeah, he was Bud Hopkins' research partner for a long time.
Studied UFOs at first in the 70s. Wrote a book about that. That's also very good. And then met Bud and got into the abduction thing. And really, I think he made a great contribution. But his sort of thesis, you know, John Mack is more of it's an outreach program to the consciously impaired, you know, kind of thing. And his Jacobs is like, no, it's a silent invasion. You know,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
building up, they're creating these hybrid beings that we can't tell if they're human or alien. They look human, and they're sort of planting them like sleeper cells all over the planet. And when they get enough of them together, then they might, you know, throw the switch, and suddenly there's more of them than there are of us, and they've got conscious control over us. And
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
the end game.
And his recent book was is it the walk is it Aliens Amongst Us, I think, or I forget what it's
Walking
called.
Among Us.
Walking
Yeah,
Among
great,
Us.
great
Yeah,
book.
and that one he's basically said it's already happened.
That's
Yeah,
right. Oh, it's
you
been
know.
happening for decades. They're
Yeah.
planting them. They're teaching these alien hybrid creatures to live amongst humanity.
Yeah.
You
How
know,
does
so
he gather his data? I mean, is it
all through hypnosis.
Yeah.
So
Through
you know,
experiencers. Yeah.
right. And there's not all through hypnosis. There's plenty of, and
People.
he'll be the first to say this. There's plenty of experiences are recalled without the use of hypnosis. So I shouldn't have
Yeah,
said that. But
that's true.
he utilizes hypnosis, and that can be controversial for a lot of people.
Well, and I know, and he has a pretty I mean, especially with the stuff he was doing with Bud Hopkins, they had a pretty rigorous kind of um,
Yeah,
sort of set of
protocol.
rules and filters that they applied to people's
Yeah.
stories to try and make sure they weren't getting people that were confabulating and
I yeah, and it's all in those books, and I'm a believer. I think there's a signal in that noise, like Jacobs himself says. There's no chance that I've gotten everything right,
yeah,
but I haven't gotten everything wrong.
yeah,
There's a signal in the noise in here.
yeah, because they would rely on they would if they got a story and it was if they only had one account that had these elements in it, they would put it away and they would
Right.
wait until they had somebody else unrelated coming in with the
Yeah.
same story. Then they would
Right.
go, okay, that's correlation. Let's wait for some more, and they would wait. They wouldn't take a story seriously unless they had multiple
Yep.
accounts that
Quite a lot of
basically
correlation.
covered the
Yeah.
same area. Yeah.
Right. Right. Right.
so? Thomas, if you with someone just starting out, because you talk about Dr. David Jacobs, you talk about what would you consider some like canon if you were recommending, or when you're hanging out with a friend who like wants to like okay, like give me a little bit of a what's gonna give me a foundation to start approaching this topic, and
Yeah.
what would you recommend?
I
Yeah, if
think
you
that
really want to ruin someone's sense of
right.
security.
Yeah,
Get
if
them
you
super
really want to
weirded out.
ruin their idea about what's real.
Sure, any, I mean, yeah, whatever what.
Hmm.
I think that it's always a good place to start with the basics, the nuts and bolts. You know, depends on what your proclivity is. Let me see if I have this great book here. Let me see if I can find it. Let's start here. This is by Michael Hesseman. It's called, you know, UFOs: The Secret History. This is a fantastic place to start. It's well written,
I
but
don't
it
know that.
basically just goes through the phenomena from the beginning to the end. It hits all the highlights. You know, it's a huge story, but it's got a lot of cool pictures.
Hmm.
But this is a great place to start. This is one of my
Okay.
favorites. UFOs: The Secret History.
Cool.
Yeah, I haven't read that one. I'll have to get that one myself.
Hesseman's terrific. I think he's German.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure. I'm not sure who he is as a person. I just know he's written a great book.
Dave,
Mhm.
what's yours? What would be one of your top recommends?
One of my tops, well, here, I would say, what do I got one here. Well, I would go with J. Allen Hynek, The UFO Experience, his
Great one.
his first book, and I really like the Day After Roswell, Philip
Corso?
Corso's book. Yeah,
That's a good book.
yeah, I like that one. And what else?
I need to read
Um,
that one.
well, the David Jacobs ones. There's also what's it, what, I'm forgetting the titles of them. There's um, the Jacques Vallée, the Hidden College,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, The
what was
Invisible
it called?
College.
Invisible College. That's it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he's Valet has written wonderful stuff, and he's really contributed to the sort of philosophy of UFOs and how we think about UFOs. And his control system is what really sort of turns me on, because
Hmm.
it's like this weird liminal space where UFOs are here but they're not here. They're not.
Hmm.
Is to him a helping us. It's pushing our thought processes in a certain direction, and he's right. I mean, that's exactly what this phenomenon's doing, and maybe the purpose. Just the fact that they exist, and that's really the crux of my book, A Human's Guide to Visiting Aliens. Just the fact that intelligent humanoid aliens are visiting the planet tells us everything we need to know as far as how and where to progress as a society. It points us in a direction. It's a beacon, it's a neon sign at the end of a long, dark street. It's
Hmm.
telling us which way to go.
Yeah. And as crazy as that sounds, it is almost certainly the truth.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, it has to be.
Yeah.
It's certainly it's leading that way, and I mean, I think I would probably. I mean, this is what got me kind of
Oh yeah.
Whitley's
Oh
original,
right. Oh
you
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
just in terms of that very, very, very personal interaction, and we talked with him a couple months ago, and that's a deep dive.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Fascinating guy.
Yeah.
he's an amazing guy and been through some amazing experiences.
Yeah.
As an interview, it was challenging because he's got so
Right.
many.
Right.
He's
So many
living in an
bizarre things have
interesting
happened
world.
to him.
Yes,
Yeah.
he's living, and it was sort of
Yeah.
there was so much to kind of cover.
And,
But I would recommend Communion, and then I guess I'd go with because Dave turned me on. I mean,
oh my,
Leslie
yes,
Kane's
yes, Leslie's book.
UFOs was
Oh, that's a great. Was that the
I
UFOs?
did.
Generals, pilots,
yes,
generals.
Yes,
it's
the pilot. The title is impossible to remember.
Yeah.
I know.
generals,
I
pilots,
just
and government officials go on the record, and I think for me it was the it did get into like the tech in the skies type of thing, but
yeah. It's a
that is
very
That's a
much
a
a
great
nuts and
place to
bolts book.
start. That's a
it
Yeah.
great
is
place to start.
it
That's
is
that's the first book I read after seeing James Fox's Out of the Blue documentary. Then
Right.
Leslie's book was the first book I picked up and read. That was
What
on.
about documentaries? I mean, they all sort of seem to be. They all kind of start blending together after a while.
Mhm.
I still
Yeah,
stick with the Phenomenon is amazing.
Phenomenon is a
that
great
one's very good.
primer. Yeah.
That's the best that's been out in the past few
Yeah.
years.
It's a
There's a
good one.
great Canadian documentary that's actually called Secret History of UFOs.
Oh, I know it and I've seen it and it's great.
It's fantastic. And
Right.
not only is the documentary itself is great, and then there's on Amazon you can see the addendums to it, which I think there's
Right.
3
Yeah, there's like
addendums.
4 parts to it.
Yeah, and the
And
addendums are all unedited interviews with people like David Jacobs, like hours of interviews with David Jacobs and
that
Bud
is a
Hopkins.
fantastic place to
Yeah,
start for
yeah,
yeah, I've
it's a
forgotten about
great
that.
documentary. Yeah,
Secret History is a terrific documentary.
yeah. And I actually
Now,
had lunch. I had lunch with Leslie Kane this Sunday,
Oh
this past
cool.
Sunday,
you didn't tell me this.
here in New York. Yeah, we had a lovely lunch.
Oh
I'm
wow.
jealous. I'm
Yeah,
jealous.
because
That,
she's a neighbor of mine. We live about like 20 minutes apart here.
Oh, that's cool. Did
Yeah.
we talk about what got you guys into this thing?
Uh, um, well, for me, it was that James Fox. Well, I was interested in it through since childhood.
Yeah,
Since watching the UFO.
yeah. In
The
search of.
English. Well, no, for me there was an English TV series called UFO by Jerry
That's
Anderson, who made
right.
all the Marianation series
Oh, the
before
best.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
So UFO was his first live action show. Later, he did Space 1999.
Thunderbirds didn't
Yeah,
right?
he did the Thunderbirds and Stingray and
So good.
yeah. So that series, I watched that when I was, what, like 6, 7 years old. Um, you know, and but then and then it sort of my interest would go up and down over the years, and
Right.
like the Phoenix Lights got me going, and
Yeah.
then
Oh
but
yeah.
then but then watching James Fox's Out of the Blue documentary was the thing that got me really taking it seriously
Well,
about 10 years ago.
yeah, it's funny how it kind of comes and wanes over the years, but it's really been it's what's cool is that we've all of us have sort of started this journey before 2017
Hmm.
in the New York Times, and Leslie Kean, had the article and really sort of changed the conversation around UFOs. I think it's really, I'm grateful for that we've seen the world as it was, sort of, and now we're living in the world as it is, and have a lot of appreciation for how far we've come. Of
Yeah,
course, how far we have to go, but we've really come quite a ways in the last 5 years.
yeah,
And as evidenced by your experience, it's a kind of private thing. It's not something you would tell maybe your friends. You might share with your family. You don't
Absolutely.
usually do a podcast about it, or do it's like it. But I think for instance, and Dave knows this. One of the guests, one of our early guests on the show, because I had some very intriguing paranormal experiences as a kid. We lived in a crazy house. I had a real connection to communion. I never had anything I would say explicitly. It was a sort of abduction experience, although certainly things that may be on the fence.
Right.
But I had a dear friend in college who related an incredible abduction experience, and changed her life. And when we did the podcast, I reached out, and she and her name's Gina Anzulis, and she was one of our early guests, and so just incredibly compelling story, and it was a big deal for her to share it. She had never shared
Huge,
it with
huge
any
deal.
yeah,
because and I'm fascinated by because it is so personal, and in her
yeah.
case, kind of a dual, had a quality of assault to it, of course, as so many of these experiences do, and then on top of it, it's it's an assault by something that many might find unbelievable, and yet
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're assaulted, and then you're traumatized
you're
again by not being
doubly,
believed.
yeah, doubly,
Makes you the member of a club that nobody would want to
Yeah.
be a member.
And
yeah, and
we also had, like, when Robin Roseanne came on, who was a friend of mine. I've
yeah,
known her over 30 years, but I had no idea that she was part of the
Wow.
Hudson Valley
Okay.
UFO sightings
Yeah.
back in the
that's an
80s.
incredible story too. I mean, her
Yeah.
entire block were out there
Yep.
looking at this.
Like
Amazing.
football stadium sized
Yeah.
craft.
Yeah.
And then we're told, it was some Halloween pilots or something kind of messing around. It was
The,
just,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
mass
Ultralight.
mass sightings are fascinating. There's
Yeah.
been a few over history, and then there's been a couple in Russia.
Yeah.
And then of course there's the Phoenix Lights and the Hudson Valley thing, and then
Yeah.
there's the one in Eastern Europe with the triangular crafts.
Yeah.
But it's funny that we haven't had a mass sighting since the age of the iPhone, have we?
Yeah. I guess.
Unless
Well,
I'm mistaken.
I'm trying to think. When was Stephenville? That's the most
Well, that
recent
was
mass.
right, but was it a
That
Stephenville?
early? Yeah, in
Yeah, that
Texas.
was.
Was that early 2000s, or?
Mm, I can't remember,
But I think it
but
was before iPhone. I think it was before anyone had decent cameras on their phones. But
it was definitely before that, and it's you'd wonder how that would go over. But it's interesting that they haven't had. And I wonder if the phenomenon, sort of their engagement with us, isn't relegated by some sort of protocol. You know,
yeah, or adapting to whatever technologies we
adapting that
have. Yeah,
allows them to operate in that liminal space, not
yeah,
overt, not covert, but this liminal space in between that the
Yeah.
phenomenon operates on, I think, is on purpose, and and may be sort of governed by human technology.
I think you're right, because
status
the
of
Phoenix
human,
Lights, we would have seen 10,000 versions of it
right,
Yeah.
today. And that would be very convincing, and it would be really hard
right, hard to deny.
dispute or deny. And it is
Yep.
fascinating that it's not maybe
Yeah.
just the government that suppresses it,
Yeah.
but they,
I mean, we,
the beings
It doesn't
themselves.
force the issue, right? It doesn't force a response. It does just enough that it warrants a response, but it doesn't force one, which is
mhm.
fascinating. And it seems to maintain that, and that makes me think of the crop circles. I've always thought that was a really smart intelligence test. You're building these glyphs, but you're putting them in wheat, so they're completely impermanent. They're passive.
Yeah.
If you wanted to take them seriously, look, every scientist in the world could travel there and study them if they wanted to. Nobody does.
Yeah.
And that must tell the creators of those crop circles a lot about who we are, where we are in our development, and I find that is fascinating as well.
Yeah.
That was one of my early experiences. Actually, was
The crop circle. Yeah.
well, being really, I was probably 6 or 7, and we were, and I just all my memory is that it was a nighttime, and my mother and probably my older brother and maybe a friend of hers or a neighbor, and these were houses spaced very far apart, farmland, Chester Springs, Pennsylvania. But she was looking at something and saying, "What is that?" It was a lot of "What is that? What is that?" At night, there was something in the sky. I don't particularly remember what it was, but I do remember the following day. My mom brought my brother and I to a farm field that was a quarter of a mile from our house, and in the field, maybe about 100 yards from the fence, we were walking this big black scorched circle in the ground. That and at that age, it's sort of it's certainly weird and concerning, but you're young enough to kind of like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's part of what's happening now. But she and the neighbors and were all kind of trying to walk this maybe I'm going to say 50 feet around. It was,
Wow. Was
and
it a landing site?
it looked like a circular burn. That's the only
I've
way I
heard of
could.
that from sites where the craft have landed, and sometimes they leave that, or the grass doesn't grow back and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah. For decades.
it
Yeah.
looked like it, and I didn't have. I to this day don't have any
Yeah,
reference or know who. It was just an extremely bizarre sort of
amazing.
thing where I was like, oh, I guess these things are possible. I guess
Yeah.
this is what's going on.
Wow.
Yeah, it's wild and amazing when you talk to people. The initial thing is, well, I've never, and then it's the actually, come to think of it, there was that time, and so it
Did your friend tell you that abduction story when you were in college together, or?
so yeah, she was older. She was about 5 years older, and was kind of like a real mentor for us because we were freshmen, and but she had started school a little later. She was married, like she was very like feet on the ground. She was in life, and
Right.
one would describe her as amazingly sort of steady and credible, and we trusted her implicitly. I mean, she was, and that's what made this story so that it. I was telling my ghost stories, and we were kind of going through, and she was like, okay, well, and our audience will maybe know. I recommend Gina and Zulis that episode. Her account is scary. It's
I'm
really
going to check it
scary,
out.
and that is what forced me to really kind of decide what side I was on. Right, that was kind
Right.
of this.
Yeah.
My heart, my beliefs. I'm like what I believe. What I was hearing was I believed it happened to her. Absolutely,
Right.
it just
Yeah.
forced me to kind of reconsider
And it turned out her mother had similar experiences too, which is
her mother had similar experiences, and what made her
and
story
had
so.
experienced that night too.
That night, she was paralyzed in bed, very aware that something traumatic was happening to her daughter in the next room, and they had this. Were able to
Worst.
sort of talk
Yeah.
about it the next day,
The
and yet,
worst when you don't
yeah.
have any control and something's happening to your kid and you
Hmm.
can't stop it.
Yeah.
I've heard stories like that on board craft, or mothers will be watching their
Oh
daughters
man.
undergoing some procedure, and I assumed these memories of mom and daughter were conscious. Huh? They were
Yeah.
not what they
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
She's never undergone like any
Right.
sort of
Yeah.
hypnotic regression. Because again, I don't think she wants to. I don't think she wants
Right.
to know more details.
Those are the stories that really
Yeah.
convince me. The people that have these memories with repeatedly with no hypnosis, and there's plenty of stories that people, you don't need hypnosis to recall these things. Which again, the scientists really don't want to look at that. They're very good at cherry picking the data so that they can come up with their so-called hypotheses.
Hmm. Yeah, and then there's always that notion, oh, these are just people that are seeking attention or looking for some meaning.
Yeah,
And as John Mack pointed out, no, most people that came to him were saying, "Will you please explain to me? I know I must be crazy. Can you please
yeah,
explain to me why I'm
yeah.
crazy and how can I stop being crazy?"
Yeah, is
And
there a pill you can give me to make this go away? I mean,
yeah,
just make it stop,
yeah,
doc.
nobody's looking to get famous from it. Nobody
Yeah,
wants it to
show me the
happen.
benefits. Show me the list of benefits you get from coming forward. I mean, it takes a lot of courage,
Sure does.
Yeah,
and
And
with
they're heroic.
it
yeah,
really is. I think it
to
really
face
is.
the
Yeah,
taking
and
it down.
their contribution to society is absolutely invaluable. The
Yeah,
people who have decided to come forward to record their story in some way, shape, or form that contributes to our knowledge of the phenomenon, and
yeah,
it's one of the best, sort of most direct experiences that we have, that we can learn about sort of
yeah,
who these beings are.
and
At least some
perhaps
of those beings.
maybe be more ready for whatever is coming,
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
and that's the thing that to me there is that kind of sort of Damocles that something is coming. This isn't
That's
just,
right.
you know, it does feel like things are escalating at this point in history, and
Yep, we're coming to a head. That's my talk is called "When Worlds Collide."
yes, yeah.
Tell us a little about. So you're gonna. So Contact in the Desert. It's the end of May. Dave
Yep,
and I
Mhm.
will be there. We're gonna do a live podcast.
Whitley
Thomas Jane
Strieber's
is
gonna be
gonna be
there,
there.
right? And
Whitley's. A lot
a
of
lot of
people
yeah,
cooler than
Cole.
Dave and I are gonna be there, including Mr. Thomas Jane, you're gonna be giving it. And so the talk again. The
yes,
title of
you're
it
doing
will
a lecture
be
and a workshop, I believe.
That's right. Yeah, me and Steve Bassett are going to do a workshop talking about
Mhm.
disclosure in Hollywood. But my
awesome.
talk is when worlds collide, and it was exactly what you were just saying. We're headed for an apogee, and we're headed for a climax here. We've got, for me, it's sort of three spheres of conscious awareness, humanity. There's the world that we live in, the world you and I live in, with all of its problems and its social media and its homeless people and the capitalism and Russia. It's
Mhm.
this very complex sort of world that everyone lives in. But there's another world, where the world of the military industrial complex, the world of elites, the people who sort of can run both sides of a war. Those
Yeah,
folks. Uh, a researcher named Dane Wigington calls them the controllers. Right? That's true.
yeah,
They're the guys. They're the guys calling the shots, rolling the dice, spending the money. They control the money. They control the flow of society. And then there's them. This the alien intelligence. So these three worlds seem to be merging into each other, and they're either gonna. I think we're headed for some sort of collision.
yeah. I know Lou Elizondo, for people who don't remember, who ran the Pentagon's ATIP program, the secret ATIP UFO research program. Seems pretty convinced that we're at what he refers to as a pivot point in human history.
Right, right. Yeah, and Dolan talks about the fact that our technology is now getting so sophisticated that it's on their doorstep. We're so close to entering their world,
Yeah.
to figuring out art of AI might help us figure out the secret of gravity.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then if we figure out this consciousness thing, I mean, we're off to the races.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
we could be a lot closer than we think for interstellar travel.
mhm.
And that requires a bit of management. I think if I me thinking about it, I'm like, yep, we're dangerous. We have nuclear weapons. We love to make war, and if we're going to be on anybody's doorstep, they're gonna make sure they're prepared.
Yeah. And a
They're
weird coincidence is that as we are maybe stepping into their world of technology, or the far beaches, I guess,
right.
of their world, there's some recent discoveries that show that chimpanzees may be entering their Stone Age phase.
Oh, I've seen this. Yeah, right.
Wait,
So
what?
they've some that chimps are maybe starting to develop
Use
stone
tools,
tools.
learning
Yeah.
how to spear fish. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of amazing. And then on YouTube the other day, I saw this one company that's teaching dogs how to drive cars.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Probably
doing it.
easier than teaching computers.
Yeah,
Having just driven up to Northern California with my son, the dog's driving idea is not entirely a bad one.
right.
Yeah.
Not
They have a
just
dog
kidding,
that looks
Luca.
like
Just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's I.
But they
That's
really got to control roadside squirrels at that point.
yeah, right. What are you
That's
going to do
funny.
that? What are you going to do that? This is. Listen, for those who are
Yeah.
great fans of your day job as well, tell us a little bit about Tropo. Where can
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, so it's on Amazon. It's
awesome?
moving. It's moving to Amazon Prime for season 2, which comes out in July.
Excellent.
So Renegade is my production company, and we developed and helped create this show based on Candice Fox is an Australian novelist, and she's written a series of books. I think there's 3 called Crimson Lake. So highly recommended for mystery fans. She is
Okay.
really smart. She's super talented. I love her work. Troppo is based on her characters that she created for Crimson Lake.
Okay.
And it's a detective story. It's a disgraced cop trying to hide out in the jungles of Australia because he's been accused of some terrible stuff, and he meets this crazy Australian ex-convict woman who decides she wants to open a detective agency. It's a lot of fun. I got into it because I love the characters, and I directed a couple episodes this year,
Amazing.
which I'm proud of. So Troppo
Exciting. Okay, so
Great.
available
Yeah.
on Amazon. Second season's coming on Amazon Prime
in July.
in July.
Yeah.
This,
I'm going to start binging it tonight. That's
yeah,
my.
absolutely. It sounds
It's
like
good
my cup of
stuff.
tea too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
This is awesome. We would love to keep talking, and we're excited to see it. Contact in the Desert.
Yeah, that'd be great. I hope you guys can track me down. I'd love to see you there.
Yeah,
We will. That'll
definitely.
be great.
Yeah.
And we really appreciate you coming
Yeah, thanks
on.
for taking this time.
This was awesome.
Yeah, this was awesome. I love this kind of thing, guys. This was terrific. Thank you
Yeah.
for having me.
Let's
Well,
do it again.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah,
Cool. Thank you all.
Cheers.
We'll see you and hopefully Thomas Jane again very soon.